This lecture focuses on the most important part of lockpicking, the tools and the techniques. First, let's have a look at the various techniques that are used by many lockpickers and see which one is taught in this class. The first technique that I want to cover is raking. For raking, we use a tool called, a rake. It is inserted into the keyway and we go in and out with the rake to set the pins to the shear line. This may take a while, since raking is based on probability and not so much on specifically setting individual pins. In general, raking is great for opening cheap locks quickly. The second method is to use a device called a pick gun. As the name suggests, it is an electronic device powered by a battery that hits the bottom of the pins. Through the transfer of energy that is hitting the pins very quickly, the pins become set in a short period of time. Again, this method is based on probability as well. Another extremely quick way of opening a lock is through the use of a bump key. A bump key originally is a blank key, so it has no bitting. Once you file down grooves into the key to the lowest position, you place the bump key into the keyhole, but not deep enough to interact with the pins just yet. You then use a bump hammer or a rubber hammer and bump the key into the plug while turning the key simultaneously. Repeat this process until the pins are set and the plug rotates. Still, the disadvantage of this method is that your bump key needs to fit into the keyway, so you have to find a blank for each specific lock as the designs of the keyways differ. And last but not least, the most important technique. The technique that is used in lockpicking competitions. The technique which is even featured in video games. Single pin picking, or SPP for short. It really is the gold standard when it comes to lockpicking and the reason why I'm teaching you this technique in this class. As you can see from the animation, in single pin picking we utilize a pick designed to manipulate the pins individually and a tension wrench to apply rotational force to the plug during the process. Even though me and many other lockpickers are advocates of single pin picking, there is no right or wrong when choosing a technique. It really comes down to personal preference. However, since SPP is the one I will be teaching you, we will go through this method step by step, so you know exactly what you have to do when you try picking yourself. So either write this down or review this section of the lecture. Step 1. Insert tension wrench in the keyway and apply slight pressure on the tension wrench. Step 2. Use a pick of your choice, usually a hook, and determine the binding order of the pins, also known as the picking order. You see, generally the pins cannot be set from front to back, but more often than not, the first pin that is pickable may be at the 3rd or 5th position, and the next pickable pin on position 2 or 1. The binding pin can be identified quite easily, as it is the most stiff pin of them, and its location is completely random. Step 3. Raise the binding pin to the shear line. Once correctly set, you will hear a distinct click sound, and the tension wrench will rotate a tiny bit, and you will feel it in your finger. Step 4. Find the next binding pin and set it. Step 5. Repeat until all pins are at the shear line and you can rotate the plug through the tension wrench. And that's basically it. Now you got the theory down. If you follow these steps, you can basically open any pin tumbler lock. You may be asking yourself now, so there is a stiff pin to press down to begin with, but why only one? Why are the pins not all squishy or all stiff? Why does one differ from the start? And that is a great question and the sole reason why we can pick a pin tumbler lock. You see, making a lock at a reasonable price and mass producing it comes with a few trade-offs, and the one I am talking about is a pin tumbler's kryptonite. manufacturing tolerances of the pinholes. During the production of the lock, holes are drilled into the plug for the pins to be set in. In an ideal world, these holes would be in a true center line with no variances between them. But the reality is harsh, and each hole drilled has some slight variation from the true center line. Therefore, the binding pin we try to identify is the pin whose hole is the furthest away from the center line. If you were to attempt to rotate the plug without the key, the binding pin would be the first in the line of pins to stop the plug from turning. This binding pin will become bound between the housing and the plug before any other pin. Ultimately, a lock's quality and price is determined by the care and accuracy of how the pinholes were drilled. Generally speaking, padlocks' manufacturing tolerances are a lot smaller than, for example, door locks, which are way more expensive. If you try to pick a padlock versus a door lock, you will realize that finding a binding pin within a door lock is way more challenging, but also more rewarding. Okay, now that we have the technique down, we definitely have to look at the tools available to us.